confirmation of the agenda, and it has been amended to include a delegation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Wadden, Councillor Ritzman-Taninga, all in favor? Carried. Okay, at this time I'll ask John Stewart to come forward. And CAO clerk Dwayne will go through the oath of office.
You just swear in the Bible to be affirmed.
Swear in the Bible.
You could repeat after me. I, John Stewart,
I, John Stewart,
having been appointed to the office of Blythe Ward Councillor
having been appointed to the office of Blythe Ward Councillor
in the municipality of the Township of North Huron,
in the municipality of the Township of North Huron,
do solemnly promise and declare that
do solemnly promise and declare that
I will truly, faithfully, and impartially exercise this office to the best of my knowledge and ability.
I will truly, faithfully, and impartially exercise this office to the best of my knowledge and ability.
I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward
I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward
or promise thereof
or promise thereof
for the exercise of this office in a biased, corrupt, or in any other improper manner.
for the exercise of this office in a biased, corrupt, or in any other improper manner.
I will disclose any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect,
I will disclose any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect,
in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act.
in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act.
I will be faithful and bear true allegiance
I will be faithful and bear true allegiance
to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II,
to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II,
for the reigning sovereign for the time being.
or the reigning sovereign for the time being.
And I make the solemn promise
And I make this solemn promise
and declaration consciously
and declaration conscientiously believing it
to be true, and knowing that it is of the same force and effect
and knowing that it is of the same force and effect
as if made under oath.
as if made under oath. Thank you.
Welcome, John. Glad to have you with us. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? None noted. Moving to the consent agenda. Is there any points that a councillor may want pulled out for special attention? Okay,
I'll move it.
Councillor Syke moves. Councillor Vodden seconds. All in favor? Carried. Okay. For public meetings, hearings, and delegations, 6.1. Ron Cook, Mike Scott, Ranko Markojevic, property standards matter.
Shall we speak now?
Joe,
Yes,
go ahead.
go ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, given the time constraints, one of our arguments had to go. We have two arguments prepared, a moral one and a legal one. Since, the moral argument is the weaker of the argument, so it had to go. The legal argument which we have prepared is quite stronger. The printed copies of the moral argument are available, but the stronger argument is the legal one. So it will be presented by Marco Jedek. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. This is my submission to the North Huron Council related to the matter of Isaac and Jacob N. Stutzman. History is gleaned from documentation provided in disclosure. According to the CBO's report to the council dated October 10, 2017, and his notes, complaint against the defendants was filed on February 1st, 2017. It was not included in the disclosure package or addendum, which made it impossible to verify. A further complaint was brought forward again in September 2017. Again, it was not provided in the disclosure package or addendum. CBO and his agents have visited premises on February 9, March 29, September 18, September 22nd, October 6, October 10, November 20, 2017, and January 25th, 2018. Following an investigation conducted by the CBO or under his direction, on December 13, 2017, Isaac and Jacob N. Stutzman, as registered owners of the property, were charged with, number one, being the owners of land located in the AG4 zone of the township did house on the property livestock in excess of the number permitted by the bylaw, contrary to section AG4-9 of the Township of North Huron zoning bylaw 82-208 as amended. Charge number two, did construct on the said lands buildings without having obtained a building permit or building permits, contrary to section 8 of the Building Code Act 92, / Ontario 92, chapter 23. Order to comply, not included in the disclosure package or addendum to it, was posted on January 25, 2018, according to notes of one Jamie Bell. Business card included with notes shows that the Township of North Huron is the employer, while North Huron website does not mention this individual at all. The deal with charge number one, where they housed livestock in excess of the number permitted by the bylaw. This charge is fully answered by the section 6.1 of the Farming and Food Production Protection Act 98, which states that no municipal bylaw applies to restrict the normal farming practice carried on as part of an agricultural operation. Definition in section 1.1 announces that agricultural operation means an agricultural, aquacultural, horticultural, or silvicultural operation that is carried on in the expectation of gain or reward. In addition, another complete answer can also be found in section 7 of the Ontario Regulation 267/03 under the Nutrient Management Act 2002, that it forms no restriction on farm animal numbers and says, for the purposes of the Act and this regulation, there shall be no restriction on the numbers of farm animals that may be managed in the course of an agricultural operation. And the Nutrient Management Act in section 2 defines agricultural operation to mean an operation that includes growing, producing, or raising farm animals. Court of Appeal for Ontario in Hill and Hill Farms Limited versus Blue Water Municipality concluded that in an ordinary meaning or on a modern approach to interpretation adopted by the Supreme Court of Canada, all municipal bylaws, including the zoning bylaw, are subject to the FFPPA in paragraphs 16 to 23. It also confirmed that the FFPPA is not subject to the Planning Act at paragraph 20. Further, the court at paragraph 19 stated that, regard to the object of the act and the legislator's intent in enacting the act as a whole, means consideration must be given to the preamble of the FFPPA. The preamble of the FFPPA makes clear that it is not simply intended to address nuisances arising from agricultural operations, but more broadly to address issues that arise from the competing interests of agricultural operations and adjacent properties. In this case, no competing interests have been identified, as all of the immediate neighbors have signed the petition in support of defendants. Charge number two, constructing buildings without having obtained permits. Excuse me. The second charge, as presented, finds the answer to it in the Building Code Act, definitions related to the term building. And sections 1.1 states that the building means the structure occupying an area greater than 10 square meters, which in this case doesn't apply. Section 1.412 of the Building Code Act, Ontario Regulations 33212, further eliminates the issue by stating that the building area means the greatest horizontal area of the building above grade within the outside surface of exterior walls. And the document that may be most readily available to members of the farming community summarizes it in the following sentence. It is a MAFRA publication titled Engineering Requirements for Farm Structures. The Building Code Act 92 makes it necessary to obtain a building permit for all farm buildings in Ontario with a floor area larger than 10 square meters. Also in Hill, referenced previously, at paragraph 15, the court affirmed that the appropriate approach to interpretation is that the words of an act are to be read in their entire context and in their grammatical and ordinary sense harmoniously with the scheme of the act, the object of the act, and the intention of Parliament. MDS2 document, publication 853, came into effect on March 1st, 2017, replacing its predecessor MDS Implementation Guidelines, on MAFRA publication 707. Both documents apply MDS2 rules to farming expansion and construction, not to the existing livestock facilities, nor do they apply to new structures in floor area of less than 10 square meters. Furthermore, implementation guidelines state that sections 3, 4, and 5 comprise the minimum distance separation formula as referenced in the PPS, and as such shall form the basis for MDS provisions enshrined in local land use planning documents. The MDS2 setbacks distances shall be met prior to the approval of the building permit application for a first or altered livestock facility occupying an area greater than 10 square meters. Structures constructed by defendants were 12 feet by 8 feet in size, therefore occupied in a building area of less than 10 square meters without any plumbing associated with them, thus not requiring a building permit. A reasonably competent chief building official would have ended this process even before it had begun. The moment a complaint was brought to his attention, he would have informed the complainant that a municipal bylaw does not have supremacy over provincial law, and that the defendants are optimally utilizing their non-prime agricultural land for food production in accordance with the relevant provincial statutes and provincial policy statements. And my observations on possible negligence, abuse of power, abuse of process, and wrongful prosecution. Documents provided by the township relating to the charges laid do not lend credence that it was a complete and full disclosure, or in the alternative, they raise a question of possible abuse of the process. If the defendants were provided with a complete discovery package, then it follows that the North Huron Council, and subsequently the court, was not provided with full and complete information. Henceforth, it would bring into question the validity of the search warrant and fruits obtained by it, as it was obtained under false information. It is not far-fetched idea to expect the competent building official to be aware of the statutes that may apply to his or her appropriate discharge of duties described, and ignorance of the law is not a defense. North Huron CBO has demonstrated utter complete ignorance of the statutes that he is supposed to administer and abide by. A municipal council is also supposed to be aware of current rules and conduct that apply to them. Since the zoning bylaw was consolidated in December of last year, this council should have been cognizant of the MDS statement that applies. And that's the one that said that sections 3, 4, and 5 shall form the basis for MDS provisions enshrined in local land use documents. Approach taken by this council and the chief building official may also be viewed as contrary to section 2.3.3.2 of the provincial policy statement, which states, in prime agricultural areas, all types, sizes, and intensities of agricultural uses and normal farm practices shall be promoted and protected in accordance with provincial standards. Since North Huron is in the prime agricultural area, these reasons question whether the members of the council had done their due diligence and whether they were aware of, or whether they had knowingly and willingly ignored their obligations imposed by the provincial authority when they considered and consolidated the zoning bylaw, as it is dated after the new guidelines came into effect and long after the PPS, FFPPA, Nutrient Management Act, and Building Code came to light. Section 8.2 of the Building Code Act explicitly prohibits the chief building official from issuing a building permit that would contravene this act, the building code, or any other applicable law. Chief building officials' persistence to violate the law by demanding that defendants apply for building permits in contravention of the Building Code Act, FFPPA, and Nutrient Management Act can only be characterized as going way beyond negligence, combined with high-handed, oppressive, unjust maltreatment under direction from this council, and continued interference, even after the matter was before the court, would be held as actionable conduct. It is worth noting that this case is in all fours with the case of Roush v. Pickering of 2012, where the court affirmed dismissal of Rule 21 motion brought by the defendant municipality. The process elected by the township involved a number of court dates, mediation, and numerous hours of preparation in order to respond to correspondence, requests, and directions of the township, taken out of an already extraordinarily busy schedule of a young Amish family starting out in a highly competitive field of small farming operation, where a margin of error is almost non-existent, and potential for catastrophic consequences is enormous, as evidenced by the loss of calves. It is noteworthy that throughout this process, not one single act by this council and its representatives could be pointed to that might reasonably be considered to be done in good faith in the execution or intended execution of any power or duty under the Building Code Act or the regulations. Rather, there are plenty of examples that would point to more than neglect in the execution of that power or duty. A reasonable person cannot choose not to inform themselves, nor to choose not to consider all information available to them in the decision-making process. Regardless of whether the process of prosecuting these charges was founded on incomplete or false information, one has to wonder if this is an isolated case, or inasmuch as this council was an active and willing participant, is it another indication of this government's customary conduct? In view of the fact that even a casual review makes it obvious that there were no legal grounds for even investigating complaints, let alone laying out the charges, negligence becomes plainly self-evident and one is faced with a question of malice. In the end, with a sour taste in one's mouth, all of this begs the question whether the harassment, economic interference, and wrongful prosecution of defendants was motivated and driven by incompetence and negligence or by malicious intent. And I would like to request a copy of the Code of Conduct referred to in Section 711 of the Building Code Act, as it is not found to be available to the public on the township's website, just like so many bylaws. Respectfully submitted by Ranko Markojevic on this 4th day of September 2018 in Wingam Township of North Huron. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your attention. It was.
Anybody care for a copy?
Yes, we have copies of all of this. And if I may just give the last line of the mine. How many?
Three?
I got three.
Four, five, 6. Oh, you have one for the lawyer.
Thank you, Ronco.
Joe,
Yes,
10 minutes was
was well over. Yes,
yes.
yes. Thank you very much for your attention herein. My little portion of the speech is available in the printed form, and we thank the council for allowing us to go slightly over. And hopefully this is going to result in some affirmative action for our friends and neighbors from this council. Thank you. I think we put them through an additional 6 months of hell since I put in the original petition back in January of this year. Thank you. Okay, we're all out of here.
Moving Moving to 7.11, Scott Municipal Drain. Notice of on-site meeting at 39298 Nature Center Road, concession 7, lot 35, part lot 34, East Wallanosh Ward, Township of North Huron.
Excuse me, Vincent. I'm just wondering, any follow-up for the group that's here? Are we going to get back in touch with them, or what is the next step from council?
We will discuss things in the in-camera session.
Why not now? Why not let
Because,
everybody know what's going on? I'm a
ju-
little bit,
just a sec. This is a council meeting, and there will be a meeting the 24th or 26th. On the 24th, there will be an open meeting where everybody can ask questions, but not in a regular council meeting. Procedures that we're told that we have to abide by. There may be not nice procedures, but they are procedures that we have to abide by. And that if we don't, staff and other council members are obligated to have us removed from council. It is a very judicial body, and council meetings are for council and staff, and we hear deputations, but we are not supposed to take questions from the gallery
So I'm
as
sorry,
part of the
when
municipal.
is the meeting where we can ask questions then?
24th of September, and it will be upstairs in the theater, will it not? So that questions at large, that is the place to ask them. Councillor Vaughn.
I'd just like to point out that you have given us a great deal to think about. It's not that we're passing this off and prepared to ignore this. This is a vital matter, and we want to see it through, and we want to do it properly. We don't want to rush off and do it, put it into a worse situation than it is now. I assure you that this will be discussed, and we will get an honest response.
Are you proceeding to court on Friday?
That is one of the things that will be discussed later in legal privilege of counsel and their solicitor.
Okay. If there are no other questions from any of the people at this time, from any of your councillors at this time, could we just ask for a little bit of a pause then in your proceedings in order to clear all of our friends out, and I'll perhaps take them across the road for a beer. If that was all right. Thank you so much for your attention herein. There are other copies of the moral argument, which we'll leave on the side table for the councillors if they would be prepared to read them. And we will carry on from there. Thank you very much for allowing us this chance to stand before our council with our plea. Again, thank you.
Back to 7.11. There's the suggested motion that the council of the Township of North Huron hereby appoint Councillor Ray Hallahan as council's representative for the on-site meeting for the Scott Municipal Drain Board.
I'll move it.
Councillor Syke, Councillor Ritzman-Tenenga. Any further discussion? No, leave it open. All in favor? Carried. Okay. And 7.1.2, the establishment of an election compliance audit committee for the 2018 municipal election. Dwayne, do you want to go and explain that a little further?
So, Your Worship, under the Municipal Elections Act, municipalities are required to have an election compliance audit committee, and that committee essentially is available to the municipality to conduct any financial audits that would be required of any municipal election campaign financing. Across the county, you have an elections working group, so it's a group comprised of all lower tier municipalities in the county. And so what is being proposed is the establishment of one election audit finance committee that would then be available to all of the lower tier municipalities should we receive a request regarding an audit, or should we receive a complaint to be investigated. As per the terms of reference, there's 3 individuals that are recommended for that committee. Tom Prout, Jackie Bishop, and Jack McLaughlin. And if one of those 3 is unable to serve on the committee, then Luann Fair is the alternate member for that committee. So essentially, what we need to do is adopt the terms of reference for the committee, and then we would be passing a bylaw appointing those individuals to the committee. So this is a report essentially informing council in terms of the requirement to establish the committee. It also is a copy of the draft bylaw as well as the draft terms of reference. So if the terms of reference and the bylaw as it is acceptable to council, we being staff, we will finalize that and bring that back to council at their next meeting for approval.
Is there any further questions? Then do I have a motion? Okay, Deputy Reeve Campbell and Councillor Stewart. All in favor? Carried. Okay. 7.2.1 from the Finance Department. Procurement policy update. Okay, Donna, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Reeve Vincent. So our procurement policy has been in place since 2004, and since that time, we've had a number of legislative changes. And with staff working with the policy, we've come up with a number of suggestions to completely overhaul this document. A complete copy of the draft policy was included in your agenda package. I realize it's a large document. It is still over 40 pages. And we are not passing this policy tonight. Tonight is for a discussion so that we can get your feedback and provide you information with how we compiled this draft policy, and so that we are hopefully we can bring it back at the next meeting or possibly the first meeting in October for passage by council. So it's important to note that all items, we continue our practice of all items have to be incorporated into our approved budget. And it's currently the practice of report comes to council if an item is not in the budget, outlining the circumstances of the expenditure and how to fund the proposed item. This will still be the case in the new policy. I noticed when I put the policy into eScribe, there was some formatting issues, so I will correct those with the final policy that comes forward. There's some numbering and a couple of pages that moved off, so we'll make sure that we get those tidied up before the final document comes forward. So I have compiled for you in the slides a list of changes. So these were the highlights that as staff that we wanted to make sure that we incorporated into our new draft policy. So the first one is bulk or cooperative buying. So this section authorizes department heads to participate with other local governments for co-op purchasing ventures. So a good example of that is with Public Works and the calcium tender that they do every year. They still have to stay within the approval limits and meet all the other requirements under the policy. The next one is vendor of record. So the vendor of record is an opportunity where local governments or lower tiers are able to participate in purchasing ventures with the Ontario government. So the Ontario government has already gone through the competitive process, selected the vendors, and therefore we don't have to go through that process. The limits still apply, and an example that we use on a regular basis, 3 examples are for the purchase of computers, courier services, and vehicles. So as I said, all that work has already been done by the provincial government, and then we as lower tiers are able to participate in those buying ventures with the province. The next item is accessibility requirements. So under the new legislation, it requires suppliers to comply with accessibility standards under the Ontarians with Disabilities Act. So this allows us to ask our suppliers for their training records and the steps that they have taken to ensure accessibility under this act. The next one is trade agreements. So we're talking about the Canada Free Trade Agreement and CETA, which is the Canadian European Union Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement. So CETA is how we refer to that one. And there are a number of new requirements under the trade agreements. They came into effect in 2017. And most of the requirements revolve around advertising and posting of the awards of a contract. So all of that has been incorporated in the sections in our new draft policy. The next item we wanted to address was advertising. So there are circumstances where advertising in our local newspapers just simply doesn't make sense, and it's added cost because we're not going to, for certain things that we are having a tender for, there are no local suppliers in our area. So the website is our official location for bid documentation, and this also meets the requirements under trade agreements. So it does give the discretion to the department heads to be able to advertise where they think that they're going to get the best results for whatever it is that the tender is outlining. The next one is increased approval limits. So we will talk about that on the next 2 slides. But Appendix D, there is a chart, and the main change with our draft policy is that council approval is not required for purchases up to $30,000. However, approvals would be required from the department head, the treasurer, and the CAO. And again, these items still have to be in the budget, and the purpose is to move business transactions along with fewer reports to council. It still is under the premise, though, the higher the limit, the more approvals that are required. So if we move on to buying used, and we've recently had an auction where we did purchase some used equipment. So this allows for the purchase of used fleet or equipment. It still has to be in the budget, which was the case for the trackless that we have been recently purchased. And if the equipment purchase exceeds $25,000, a report will be presented to council as soon as possible after the purchase has been completed. And so basically this, the most of these cases are for auction items. So we participate, we can buy used equipment and used vehicle on GovDeals, but there's a specified auction date and time, and so you have to be bidding online as the auction closes. And then we have our prescribed limits, which were outlined in the budget as to how much we can go up to. And then the Public Works Director or whoever's department this would be affected by would bring a report if over $25,000 to council. And again, it would still be in the budget. So if you remember, the used trackless was in the budget. At that time, we thought it was going to be about $100,000, and Sean was able to get it for significantly less than that. So that is the buying used portion. One of the next ones, and I'd like to have a little bit of discussion on this one, is either sole purchases or single purchases. So from single supplier, that means that the item is available from one or more suppliers, but for various reasons, then we choose to purchase from a single vendor. A sole purchase means that only one supplier is available. So those are the two differences, and we do run into these on occasion. And the practice has been to bring a report to council outlining why we are recommending either sole purchase or single purchase. So at this time, we have recommended a limit of $2,500. We have a form, Appendix F, which would have to be completed by the department head, and it would require a report and authorization of council. This limit might be too low. It might mean that we would have a lot of reports for $2,500 purchases coming to council. So it is the one item that I would like to get your feedback on. I don't know if you made any notes about this particular item when you were reviewing the policy. But I guess I would like to have some discussion on whether you are comfortable with the $2,500 limit, or whether you would rather see a higher limit there. Does anyone have any comments on that?
That I talked to Donna this afternoon about it, and that if the department head is sure enough as to what they're doing, I think if there's the 30,000 limit, as long as the treasurer and CAO sign off, I don't see any problem putting this to 5,000. That's just a comment.
So the overage is up to 5,000, like you're stipulating that is?
That would be
An
one of
example.
the changes I might look at, but it's council's decision, and I'm just throwing that out as an option. Councilor said,
Yeah, I think 2,500 is in my mind, is a little light in the sense where we've got a budget of 14 or 15 million, so it seems a little light. However, the question more for me becomes, as a counselor, I really wouldn't know if an item is really single sourced or sole sourced. How does one council understand whether that you're utilizing that provision versus another provision that you should be using? I guess that's the question I'm concerned about, not necessarily the dollars. How does one council know that when we get the report that says, well, this is sole source? I guess we're going on the belief and the trust of our staff that says, I'm assuming that there's approvals up, including treasurer and CAO, that if there's 3 people approving the fact that it's sole source, then I guess I'm okay with it. But I just, from a council perspective, as a council member, I wouldn't know if it was sole sourced or not, and therefore, how do I know whether we're just utilizing that provision in order to buy something that we really may need council provision? So that's just my comment there.
going to Donna.
Yeah, and fair question. So when those reports come forward, I can't think of an example of one that we've had recently, but I know that our previous rec director had brought forward a few of those, and she clearly outlines in the report all the reasons why that it would be a single or sole supplier. So she would go through and say that, say for example, on a single supplier where there are other vendors available, but perhaps that's the main type of equipment that we have, or what she's looking for is only compatible for that, or that the maintenance was available in the area. So those are some of the things in the past that she has brought forward as an example for sole or single supplier reports that you've seen over the years.
Councillor Vaughan first.
And I think basically what you're doing is defining what you mean by sole. Like, is this the only place in the world that you can get this item? And that's probably never the case. But so with it, some explanation of what is meant by sole.
And the reasons behind
The
it,
reason.
why the department head is recommending it as either a sole or a single.
Maybe that should be defined in the policy.
They are, yeah, under the definitions page.
Councillor Slate.
Yeah, so I'm fine with that perspective. I guess the question for me ultimately is, you know, if that's something that happens and you just happen to mention something about local and that type of stuff, but the conversation has been, and at least at this point, this council has mentioned the question multiple times. Well, we should be looking at stuff more local than we are. However, based on what this report tells me is that unless everything is equal,
That's right.
you can't do that. So the conversation is that even if it's single source, but it's local, you not necessarily are the ability to be able to do that based on what I understand of the policy. So I guess we have to be very clear about, is it single source or sole source because that's the only option we have? Or is the real reason is that because we want to buy it, it's only available. But you know, sole sourced items is a pretty cut and dry. There's only one place, that's all you get. But single sourced items tend to be a little bit skeptical because you can get it somewhere else, but you choose not to. So the question is, are you meeting the policy by giving us that report after the fact? Because if it's already bought, like if it's already necessarily up to the $5,000 or $6,000 limit, whatever that limit is, you buy it already, and it comes to council with a report after the fact. Then the conversation is there more questions that need to be asked?
So the way it's written right now is that any purchases over 2,500 have to come to council in the form of a report for approval before purchasing.
Right, but what I'm saying is we raise that limit. If we raise the limit to 5 or 10 or whatever, then it just gives more room for staff to make that call, which I'm okay with. In essence, I just want to make sure council's clear about what it's really more single sourced items that I'm concerned about, not the sole. I just want to make sure that we have that understanding off the get-go if we want to move that. I don't want to see more reports come here for $2,500. I don't think it's value added at all. But I'm concerned about the fact that we don't want issues with sole or single sourced items going through that process when it really should come here for really a discussion.
And that's why we kept the limit so low. So that you would see them all first. So it's a trade-off, whether your comfort level versus, more reports and moving the business along. So we can come back to that one, but that's exactly the discussion that we want to have on this item. So that's one that we need to nail down before we can move forward.
I would see it as a question of if it was a part or a service that was available to have a machine or something working immediately in comparison to being able to wait and get it from someplace else, but that it would take more time. And I would see the urgency being a time constraint without the machine working. Councillor Vaughan.
That can come into conflict with other regulations. I understand that, for example, if you're soliciting some part or some service and you get quotes from various sources, we're not allowed to choose the local one in preference without other reason. And Well, I think let's maybe getting into a dangerous area if we say, well, it's a lot faster to get it next door than it is to get it from Toronto, which I understand is not legal.
Donna?
Yeah, so the example, I think the better example of that is compatibility with existing equipment. So I can't think of, perhaps Sean can tell me an example off the top of his head.
Actually, yeah, if I may read
Go
a
ahead.
classic example, SCADA system that operates a water and wastewater plant. When the facility is constructed, there's a tender goes out, somebody wins that. Now, there's a lot of people that can write code and they can write it very well. But in that case, I would always recommend single sourcing to the original service provider because they've written the code, they understand the nuances. To go a different route could be cost prohibitive for the municipality. So that's an example where I've personally used it, and I think it's very easy to justify because it's cost to the municipality if you don't pursue it.
Councillor Singh?
I completely agree, and I completely agree actually with the Reeves comment about, if it's between getting something working and not getting something working, we want to make sure that we don't tie the hands of staff in order to not have functionality of equipment. So I think that's, whether it's buy local or not, we're in the 21st century where shipping is pretty quick in most instances and most things. So I think as long as this guideline is used in a sense where it's used in the idea of getting things what we need from a discussion like the public works director said, or in the fact of a breakdown, then we can utilize that type of stuff. But I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page when we talk about this policy.
Good,
Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. That's a good example. Okay, so the next one is our drinking water quality standard management. So you've all heard of DWQMS. And so we have some wording that has been inserted into the policy to meet the requirements under that legislation. Also, another new one is we are supposed to encourage environmentally sound acquisitions where possible. And so that wording has also been incorporated into a section of the policy. And then again, I just did,
Donna?
sorry, yes?
When we approve the drinking water quality standards, will each council member have to sign a new copy?
Sean would probably be able to answer that better than I. Do you know that?
Well, I think that what we were speaking to here was there are certain standards within the DWQMS that must be adhered to with regard to procurement. So NSF 60 level products for consumables, NSF 61 for materials that come in physical contact with the water. And I think I was trying to capture the fact that we would ensure that we adhere to those standards.
Okay. I was just, there's a change in what we signed, question if we wouldn't have to redo it.
No, there's been no change that would require any.
Materially in the principle of the fact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so I did just want to touch on, since you have brought up the local preference. So as with our previous policy and this policy, there is no preference given for buying local unless all other factors, including price, is equal. So you do have to think about all the accounts that you do see on a regular basis. We buy a tremendous amount of things from the hardware stores, the grocery stores, all the stores up and down Main Street are supported by the township for a number of small purchases, which certainly add up over a year. So we're definitely supporting our local suppliers in North Huron. Also to note, the county does not give local preference either. There's a number of documents that have been written. Here's a white paper on preference and risk associated with local preference. And so as we've talked about before, what happens if you do adopt a local preference is that it makes it very difficult for other suppliers to bid because they know they're not going to get it anyway. And so then in the long run, the prices go up because you're not getting the competition on the tenders. Also, we've talked about before too, with a local supplier, they don't have the transportation or the, say overnight accommodations and some of those sorts of things that do drive the prices up on a construction job. So they should be able to offer us their best price. So just to make those comments. So I want to move on then to the next slide. So this is a little bit about process. So these are our categories as outlined in the policy. So petty cash up to $100, that's what we've just been talking about, that staff can go to the hardware store and get the items that they need. A direct purchase is from $101 to $2,500, and where possible, we're looking for 2 informal quotes in writing. That could be by email or fax, that type of thing. It is a very informal process. Next, the next process is actually called informal quotation, and it covers $2,501 to $10,000. This does require 3 written quotes, but it doesn't require formal advertising or receipt of sealed bids. The higher we go, moving into request for quotation, $10,001 to $30,000, requires 3 written quotations. All suppliers receive the same written information package, and it requires sealed bids and specified bid closing times. Then we move to our highest avenues for purchases, which is the request for tender and the request for proposal, which are over $30,001. So on the tender, when we're going out for tender, the idea is that all things are equal in the information package, and our intent is to accept the lowest bid. So we have written information in a prescribed tender form, and again, we have sealed bids and specified closing time. The request for proposal is slightly different because we are looking for a solution to a problem. And so we can give them the information that we have, what general information that we're looking for. An RFP could be issued by invitation, most of them are, and also it still does require a sealed, and I say bids and bid closing time, but it requires a sealed submission and by a specified closing time. So that's a little bit about the process for the dollar categories that we're talking about. And then lastly, if we take those same categories, and I apologize, this slide is small, you have it in your agenda package. So I just want to go over this in a bit of detail as well. So this is the approval authority limits for the policy. And so under the document execution, that's who's signing the documents and what's required. It really doesn't have a lot of effect on the dollar amounts. And it talks about that in the policy. So say, for example, if there was a formal agreement, we adopt agreements by bylaw, so therefore those would have to come and be signed by the reading clerk. So that's an example there. So I'll move through this quickly. So petty cash is up to $100. The purchasing authority is a department representative. The department head, nor the treasurer, nor the CAO or council, none of those have to actually approve that purchase. When you go to our direct purchase, then the department head, that's $101 to $2,500. The department head has to approve it, but that's where it stops for approval there. When you move into the informal quotation process, $25,001 to $10,000, then department head approval and treasurer approval is required at that level. When you move to the next level, $10,001 to $30,000, department head approval, treasurer approval, and CAO approval is required for purchases up to $30,000. Over $30,000, then all the approval authorities are required. So the department head, treasurer, CAO, and council are required to give approval for everything for the request for proposal and the request for tender. And then also we discussed the $2,500 for single and sole. So all levels would need to give approval for that. The same as negotiation greater than $10,000, all levels would need to give approval for that. Special circumstances are your emergency situations, and so department head, treasurer, and CAO approval is required, but not council. But special circumstances over 50,000 would require council approval. So that may be difficult to get depending what the emergency situation was, but that's what our plan is. So also what I would like to do is under section 22, add the wording to that, the special circumstances category that says specifically in a separate line that council approval is required over 50,000 for special circumstances. So that may take a special meeting.
Councillor Sun.
Is in the policy, will it determine or define what special circumstances is?
Yeah.
So I just want, I didn't happen to read that, but I wondered if it was in there or not.
So if you look in the definition section on page 8, it lays out all the events that are defined as a special circumstance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Yep.
No problem. Okay, so that is the highlights of our draft procurement policy. I appreciate your time in reading through this large document. This has been one of our projects that we've wanted to get off our plate and be able to move on. So I'm open for any questions or suggestions, and if you come up with anything over the next day or two that you've thought of and want clarification, please contact me, and we'll work that in for the next presentation to council.
Councillor Vaughan.
I'm wondering about emergent situations. There can be many kinds of emergency arises that requires new equipment or new costs or new support or all sorts of things.
Right.
Do we have definitions of what are the valid rationales?
Yes, that's what Councillor Seeper is referring to. So that's page 8. There's the definitions of special circumstance. And so as I was saying, the CAO can approve up to the 50,000, but over 50,000, then we would need to have a special council meeting or something to be able to approve an emergency over 50,000. So I was just going to add that wording to make it a little bit more clear in that particular section, just so that we were all on the same page.
I guess I was thinking in terms of what constitutes an emergency, that the criteria that would apply. I mean, in most cases, it would be common sense.
So some of them that are listed here is an event that is exceptional or could not be foreseen and is likely to pose a threat to health, safety, or welfare of the public. An event that, unless immediately addressed, is likely to cause significant loss or damage to property.
That's exactly what I'm looking.
Right, so those are all laid out here in those definitions, so that's.
I knew you'd look after that.
Okay, so are there any general comments from council then? How are you feeling about this draft policy? As I said, we would like to move this forward. I have a copy of the, I consulted with the county treasurer and I have a copy of the county policy. And as I said in my report, our draft policy was drafted after the County of Perth. They were one of the first ones to have adopted some of the new legislative requirement for all the trade agreements and such. So, shall I make the few changes that we've talked about and bring it back then next meeting, or would you like a longer period of time to review?
Councillor Sun.
No, I think that's fine. You know, in thinking about what in that chart that you were talking about, I'm okay, even the single source, after all the discussion we had about even moving that single source up to the negotiating level, up to the 10,000. Like that, like again, the same people are approving the negotiation discussion. So what would be the difference of giving them the same level of sole purchase or single source items the same level. We're gonna know about them, as long as we're not. It's just the fact that it just keeps the process moving and allows staff to continue to do their job. So, no, I'm okay personally with that. But I'll leave that for if other councilors have issues with that.
Well, thank you, Donna. I think you've put a lot of work into this, and thank you for that. It's just, I'm not confident in my own reading of it, that there isn't some parts that still seem like they're in contradiction to other parts. And so I'm going to go through it again, and hopefully if any of the councilors have concerns, please go through it again.
And if it's, I provided a hard copy. If any of you would like a hard copy, 40 pages is a lot of reading, just send me an email and I'll print you off a hard copy so that you can go through it in more detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, 7.22. Yeah, we did procurement policy. 7. Oh, the motion. Yes. Do I have a mover? Councillor Stewart, Councillor Sight, and this is for procurement policy update. All in favor? Carried. Moving to 7.22, Belgrade Water Connection. The Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Finance dated September 4th, 2018, regarding a connection request to the Belgrade water system. And is the rest of it as it's printed, Donna?
Yes, so we discussed that we amended our bylaw, then bylaw number 74, 2018, giving permission for 2 additional properties to connect to the Belgrade system. I think that was last meeting. And so we've been in contact with one of those property owners and advised that the options that we gave the Belgrade system users back in 2009, I've listed them in the report. And he is satisfied with a 15-year repayment term. And I explained to him what the interest rate would be at the time of connection. It would have to be recalculated for that. And he seemed satisfied with that. So he is working with Morris Turnberry, who are the owners of the system. And he has to engage his own contractor to be able to coordinate the hookup from his property and to the system. So I think everything else is in place, and we can notify him of the options.
Okay. Councillor Hallahan moving?
Moving.
Okay. And then Deputy Reeve Campbell. Any further questions? All in favor? Carried. Okay, the next thing is 7.4.1. Sean, I'll let you introduce that topic.
Thank you, Reeve Vincent. For council is a standard procurement. This is to do with the HVAC system that services the fitness center at the West Cast Community Center. The unit has absolutely reached the limit of its serviceable duty. It's 18 years old. And because of the nature of the fitness center, it works a little harder than some of the other HVAC systems. It's the point that it's failed numerous times. There were certain measures taken in order to keep it running through the summer, but it's been close to failure at all times. So it was determined, and given the fact that this was discussed in the 2018 budget deliberations, we ended up going to tender for the unit. Now, in looking at the project, the one thing that we were very cognizant of is that that entire building was engineered to work together. So you've got different climate zones and HVAC centers that are working the same. So we were very careful to, I don't want to use the word single source or sole source, but we specified in the tender that we would only accept a like replacement because it's a train unit. We didn't want another firm coming in with a different particular manufacturer, get that in, find out that it's not compatible with the next. So we try to keep this as close to standard or as built as possible, only to find out that the unit that's up there is obsolete because of its age. So one thing we did do prior to putting the tender out, we went to Trane and determined through their technicians what the actual modern replacement would be, and then put the tender out. That being said, one of the requirements of the tender was that the service provider that wins the contract has to provide confirmation from Trane that the unit that we've spec'd is appropriate. So just kind of an extra layer of security for us. We had a mandatory site visit because of the location of the unit. We thought that was prudent. We had 2 bidders that attended the site visit and submitted bids, and that were Montgomery Industrial Services. They came in at $25,965 plus applicable taxes. Cliffs Plumbing and Heating came in at $37,000 plus applicable taxes. We reviewed both bids or submissions and found them to be compliant. We had $35,000 in the budget for this project, so the recommended service provider, which of course is Montgomery Industrial Services, comes in under budget to complete the work.
Councillor Seitzman moves. Councillor Ritzman seconds. Any further? All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving to the asphalt crack sealing. Back to Sean.
Thank you, Ray Vincent. Similar to what was done last year, of course, in the capital budget, we used OSIF funds, Ontario Community Infrastructure Funding Program, to fund rural road resurfacing. We did that in 2017 and in 2018. In both cases, the job ended up coming in slightly less than the OSIF funds that were available to us. And like last year, we looked at further maintenance opportunities, specifically crack sealing. So there was a bunch done last year. Our operations supervisor came this year, said he would very much like to continue that program. And he presented 20,000 feet of road surface that he's particularly interested in protecting. Just a little bit of discussion surrounding the crack sealing. The purpose of it is to take care of your best roads. So we look at our highest quality roads, the ones that we don't really want to be repairing anytime soon, and apply it, because basically it prevents the freeze thaw impacts on any cracks that have formed on the surface. So as you can see in the report, he's identified a number of locations. Before I get to that, I guess we should, in keeping with the procurement policy, we did get 3 written quotes. We had 3 prices come in. One was 90 cents per linear foot. The next, and that was watertight asphalt sealing and marking. Terra Nova Paving came in at 95 cents per linear foot. And Superior Road Products, difficult to interpret how they took a different approach at it, but it worked out to roughly $1.28 per linear foot. So the proposal before council is that we use some of the remaining funds, specifically $20,000, to do 20,000 feet. We would look at 3,000 linear feet in Auburn on North Huron Road. We'd look at 6,000 linear feet in Blythe, specifically King Street between Queen and Morris, as well as McConnell between Queen and Morris. And then in Wingham, Elm Street from Carling to the end, Highland Drive from Elm Street to Charles Street, and Grandview from Elm Street to Charles Street. And that's an estimated total of 11,000 linear feet. If approved, this work would be scheduled for completion late in September, which is pretty much the optimal time to do the work.
Motion to approve.
And Councillor Hallahan seconds. Any further questions? All in favor? Carried.
Ray Vincent, sorry, I have a question, not particularly pertaining to this.
Go ahead.
In looking at a couple of streets in Blythe, I mean, they're well beyond crack sealing at this point. There's Mill Street, the entire length of it, and Wellington Street from Queen to Morris. Are those street reconstructions, are they somewhere in a plan that at some point in time they're going to be worked on?
Through you, Reeve, actually, we're waiting, I'm expecting within the next 2 to 4 weeks to have a master servicing plan back from BM Ross. And what we've asked them to do is a complete audit of sewer systems, water system, consideration to storm and road condition. And we've tried to tie it all together. Our hope, now again, I haven't seen the results, but our hope is that as we move forward, if funding is available, we would do a portion of road that would be complete road reconstruction, but then also we'd like to see a portion of road. And Blythe was one of the ones we discussed where there's so much alligator cracking on so many roads where we do a simple resurfacing. So we basically be looking at the highest priority roads for full resurfacing and then trying to develop through that master servicing plan, kind of secondary or easier to address roads. That's the hope, and we're expecting it by the end of September.
Thank you.
Okay. National Disaster Medication Program funding. Who wants to, do you want to take that one, Sean?
I'll take that one, Dave. Thank you. Basically, this is a very interesting fund, and all this report is doing is asking for authorization to apply on behalf of the municipality. It was brought to our attention by the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority as being a very interesting program that will fund up to 50% of approved projects. Now, if you look at the report, approved projects include, and they are actually in order. It'd be risk assessment projects followed by flood mapping, followed by mitigation planning, and followed by investments in non-structural small-scale mitigation projects. The township already has risk assessment. The MVCA has some concerns over the age of our mapping. It was done in the 70s, I believe. It was completed in 1976. It's 42 years old. And they came and suggested that we would consider this because obviously since 76, there's been a lot of changes to the floodplain. If we were, and as we looked at the project as a whole, there was mutual benefit not only for North Huron, but also for Morris Turnberry. So the suggestion was that we apply, North Huron would take the lead on it, but certainly we would look at trying to secure the 50% funding for the data collection. And then the remaining 50% would be split evenly between Morris Turnberry and North Huron. Beyond that, and I'll take a step back to the cost part in a second. Beyond that, Maitland Valley said they would do all of the engineering associated with the work. So we provide the data, they crunch the numbers and come up with new modern floodplain mapping. The main benefit would be that they suspect that given all the development, there could be very real changes to the floodplain, which could potentially free up areas for development that might not fall into that special provision area or rating. That being said, the cost associated with this project is in the LiDAR. And I would have to dig into it's light detection and ranging systems. And what they basically do is they're advanced laser surfacing or measuring units that they use from a plane, and they would fly back and forth in a grid and get a three-dimensional map of the area so that Maitland Valley Conservation Authority could use the data. If we're successful, we expect the cost will be about $40,000, which would end up being $10,000 to North Huron. If we're not successful, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and we can talk about the need for it as we move forward. And the other thing just to suggest or mention that, again, I'm looking for authorization to apply. This won't be something that will be dealt with until probably early next year, so we would be discussing it in the budget with council at that time.
Councillor Vauden moves.
I would move that.
Councillor Ritzman-Tenenga seconds. All in favor? Carried. Okay. The Union Gas easement preliminary request. Sean?
Thank you, Reeve. This one's very straightforward. As some people may be aware, directly behind the Maitland Valley Community Church, there's a property that's with a developed property that's completely landlocked. The owners of that property have requested gas service. So the Union Gas looked at their options as to how they would supply the gas. They one option was to directionally bore under the newly paved parking lot of the community church, which was suggested as less than optimal. The other option would be to go around. Now, we
want to go heavenward at some point.
We own the property to the north of the Maitland Valley Community Church. There's a bit of an easement there that the church has, so Union Gas would like to look into having it restaked to determine where an easement would fit. I did talk to Denise over at the Recreation Center just to confirm that there's no future plans that I wasn't aware of for the property. There are none. It's designated as a parking area for people to do the trail. So basically, if council is open to it in principle, I can get back to Union Gas. They'll commission a survey, and then we would try to move forward as quickly as possible once we've confirmed the actual property lines. Because the whole idea was that they would want an easement that would be basically 30 feet abutting next to the church property. So to keep it as far to the south of that property as possible.
Councillor Singh,
I'll move it.
second. Councillor Stewart. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Daycare facility roof repair tender for service. This one's more fun, Sean.
This, thank you, Reeve. This will be a little different procurement process. Basically, as council's aware, the daycare roof has been a long-standing problem. There's been a number of options and that have been looked at, from completely removing and redesigning the roof to physically repairing what's there. We looked at, it was actually about a month and a half ago, we ended up looking at talking to a local service provider or a regional service provider to have them attend the site to look at the facility. I needed to be brought up to speed on it. When he looked at it, it was very apparent that just a complete standard replacement of the existing structure is an acceptable approach. So basically, there's the 4 shingled monitors up there with the skylights in them. Replace those shingles; they're in horrific shape. And then there was question on the integrity of the roofing structure itself, the membrane. So we looked at having that replaced as well. After discussing it with them, we got budget pricing that led us to believe that we could actually move forward with this project. It came in, well, in very close range to $100,000 for the work. Further investigation determined that the roof structure that's up there now was just laid over top of the original one. And in an effort to actually do the job and have it completed well, I put a tender out to have the roof monitors reshingled, and then to have the entire roof membrane stripped off, all of the substrate removed right down to the steel decking, and then rebuilt to factory specifications with a 10-year warranty. And I want to circle around to the 10-year warranty shortly, but the other thing we did is we insisted on a site visit because it's an operational daycare, and we wanted to see if we could actually have this work done without waiting till the Christmas break or something like that, when really the quality of the installation could be called into question. I had 7 actual firms show up for the job, so there was a lot of interest in the job. In the end, 3 bidders. I excluded one of the bidders because in the specifications, we're not roofers. So in the specifications, we required that anybody bidding on this job, because of its technical aspects, had to be a CRCA member, so it's a Canadian Roofing Contractors Association. To become a member, basically what happens is their health and safety program and the quality of work is heavily scrutinized and vetted. So I knew that by putting that standard on there, we would only get certified, reputable firms. So of the three that we had bid, we had Grand Valley Roofing and Coatings Limited, as well as DJ Peet Roofing and Sheet Metal, both met all the qualifications. Grand Valley came in at $88,550. DJ Peet Roofing and Sheet Metal came in at $93,408. Now, it's as I believe council's aware, that the county has provided us with up to $100,000 to put towards the job. So basically, when I looked at that and some of the intricacies, first off, we knew that we were within that budget threshold that we needed to be in. The other thing that was included in the budget last year for 2018 was some $25,000 in engineering work. So what we needed to look at, aside from doing the job, I need to have a contingency for this one. The roof was put together in 1976. So basically, the presence of asbestos comes down to the flip of a coin. It's pretty close to a 50-50. So we have to be prepared for the eventuality of $15,000 worth of additional asbestos remediation to take place. As well, I don't know what the condition of the wood underneath the shingles are. So we were looking also for the $25,000 that was engineering to be reallocated to be applied towards contingency for this job. And then the final piece, before we get into the more interesting details, is we called for a 10-year warranty. Simply an arbitrary number. I wanted a good warranty. When I talked to the service provider after looking at the reports, I said, well, what's the difference between the 10 and the 20? He said, typically, depending on the system, it's about $500. So, the thinking is, if approved, I would pursue a significantly better warranty, because usually all they do is slightly change some of the fastening and hardware. The membrane themselves are designed for that kind of durability. So, that being said, of course, see the recommendation. I think it's prudent that before any decision was made on this, that council received information from the township solicitor in the closed session, in accordance with section 239 2F of the Municipal Act, the client solicitor privilege.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all we can do at this time. Okay, we will come back to that in camera. Okay. Pass this motion this time. Councillor Ritzman-Tenenga, Deputy Reeve Campbell, all in favor? Carried. We received this for information at this time. Was what we were doing.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Moving to 7.8.1, Integrity Commissioners, closed meeting investigator. Lynn?
Sure. So in terms of Bill 68, which came into effect last May, amended a number of municipal pieces of legislation. And the purposes of the amendments were threefold. One was to enhance municipal accountability and transparency. The second was to promote municipal financial sustainability. And the third was to help ensure responsive and flexible municipal governments. As part of the amendments, it does require the municipalities to have an integrity commissioner, a closed meeting investigator, and an ombudsman of some form or nature. The provision that has received the greatest attention among municipal staff, certainly across the county in terms of the lower tiers, is a requirement for us to have an integrity commissioner. So in terms of the Municipal Act, it states that a person may request an investigation as to whether a municipality or local board has complied with Section 239 or procedural bylaw under subsection 238 regarding a meeting or part of a meeting that was closed to the public. The same section also states that the investigation is to be completed by the municipality's closed meeting investigator, or in the event the municipality is not appointed closed meeting investigator, the Ontario Ombudsman. There is no charge to municipalities if council so chooses to go with the Ontario Ombudsman Services. With respect to the Integrity Commission and the Municipal Ombudsman Services, the Ombudsman has no jurisdiction to act or to be appointed as an Integrity Commissioner or Municipal Ombudsman for municipalities, simply for the reason that the Ombudsman has the authority to oversee and review the actions of the Integrity Commissioner of the municipality and the Ombudsman under Section 14 of the Ombudsman Act. In response to this new legislative requirement, and in particular with respect to Integrity Commissioner, the county canvassed the lower tier municipalities to find out if there was an interest in working together to look at potentially securing the services, in particular of one firm that could provide all three services to the local municipalities. And the response from the lower tiers was positive, and as such, the county council authorized county staff to release a request for proposals for that, for those three services. The RFP that the county issued was in May. Responses were requested back in June. 2 firms did respond. Those 2 proposals have been reviewed by staff of 4 municipalities. And essentially one of those firms has been invited to make a presentation to get more information and to get more detail in terms of the proposal that they're making. Essentially, the firm has been invited to come and make a presentation in mid-September to all of the lower tier municipalities. And North Huron staff are going to be in attendance, or will be in attendance. And then we'll bring back a report to council in terms of the recommended firm, if that is in fact the recommended firm. And then in terms of how council wishes to proceed at that point. Council can proceed with appointing the firm that is chosen, if the firm is in fact chosen, similar to all of the other lower tiers in the municipality. If council was to decide or did decide that they're not interested in that particular firm, then council would direct staff to undertake, and we go through our own process, and we secure our own firm to provide those 3 services. The county has indicated that if there is a retainer fee for the firm, that they will be prepared to cover that. But if there was to be an investigation in North Huron, for example, then we would be responsible for hourly fees, mileage, and all those associated costs that would go with that. So this report is for information purposes. As I've indicated, there has been a firm that has been invited to come and make a presentation, and there'll be a follow-up report to council, and staff will be seeking direction from council as to how council wishes to proceed at that time.
Councillor Syed?
Just I have a question. It seems odd to me that you can't appoint the Ontario Ombudsman, but if you don't have an investigator, they'll do it. So somebody needs to clarify that. Can they or can they not do? You just can't appoint them. Is that what this is telling me? We just can't appoint the Ontario Ombudsman to be our closed meeting investigator. But if you don't have one, they will do it if you get a complaint.
Right. So they don't want you to appoint them as their closed meeting investigator. If you have not appointed, if you don't have someone appointed and you did receive a closed meeting investigation complaint, then the default is to the Ontario Ombudsman's office, basically providing a service to that individual who has filed that complaint.
Go ahead, Trevor.
But under this section, it is a requirement under Bill 68 to appoint somebody. So that's what you're telling me. It's a requirement under Bill 68 to actually have somebody appointed. You can't just say, we're not going to appoint.
Through Reeve, yes, that is correct, that we are required under Bill 68 to have an integrity commissioner, a closed meeting investigator, and somebody to provide ombudsman services.
Councillor Vaughn.
My observation over the years is that it's a real advantage in making a choice of who the ombudsman is rather than just turn it over to the Ombudsman of Ontario. Sometimes that is not a very pleasant process. I'm not referring in terms of getting off the hook or anything like that. I mean, there's a lot of showmanship in that office in some instances that gave a lot of noise and didn't produce much advantage. So I think either collectively or individually choosing the ombudsman, the integrity officer, is a very good decision.
Councillor Slade.
I do recall us having one. I believe we canceled that requirement because we thought the ombudsman would be able to do it. I think that's the intention back, because I know we had a firm that we had appointed a couple of years ago that was on retainer. Now, we never had to use them, but the intention of, unless Bill 68, unless we read it wrong, was the intention is we didn't really need them because we get the services for free from the ombudsman. But what I'm hearing now is Bill 68 saying, no, you can't just default to the ombudsman. You need to have somebody. So it seems very unclear about this whole discussion about the closed meeting investigator or not. Either tell us we need one or we don't. And I think now they've told us we do. It just seems like it's gone a long way for us to go around the circle to get back to the same place we were 2 years ago. As a comment, nothing more than a comment to the bill.
Councillor Vaughn.
It's my impression that the ombudsman's office just doesn't want to be tied up full time in doing those investigations. They've got other broader issues that they need to look at. And they don't want to be tied down to serving a whole bunch of municipalities across the province. That's my impression.
Well, at conventions, I go to the ombudsman's office display and just say alone that we have had residents that even when we did have a person to do integrity commissioner stuff, they went directly to the provincial ombudsman with their complaints, so that it's not that it isn't happening, they just don't want it happening all the time.
Yeah.
So let me understand, if we appoint somebody, at some point there's an appointment, but if somebody wishes to go directly and make a complaint to the ombudsman, is the conversation from the ombudsman going to be to us that says, who's your appointment commissioner, and we'll forward that complaint on to them? Is that the intention of this?
Yes.
Okay, that's because, again, if they got the complaint and then did the complaint, it voices the question of why do we get the integrity commissioner in the first place? So I just want to make sure we're not wasting resources here.
So through the Reeve, in terms of if there was a complaint to the ombudsman, their first call would be to the municipality. And the question to the municipality would be, has the municipality appointed a closed meeting investigator? If we have, then that complaint would be referred to that individual. If we haven't, then it is then in their domain. It would be in their domain, they would deal with it.
Great, thank you. I'll move it, Reeve.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vaughn seconding. All in favor? Carried. Okay, 7.82, Town Hall Public Meeting. You want to take that, Dwayne?
So essentially at the last council meeting, there was a discussion and council decided to proceed with the town hall public meeting. And we've looked at the calendar, September was a month that we were given. based on calendar and other meetings. We're suggesting town hall public meeting on Monday, September the 24th at 7 o'clock in the Wingham Town Hall Theater. In 2016, it was held in Blythe. In 2017, it was held in Belgrade. So if that date is acceptable to council, we will proceed, subject to council's approval, to advertise the public meeting. And we will provide copy of the notice of that to the 2018 Municipal Election Council candidates to attend to independence.
Okay. Councillor Syed,
I'll move for discussion.
moving. Councillor Hallahan seconding. You want to
Yeah,
talk?
just
Go ahead.
just clarification. So, you know, we have, I think the one concern that I do have with, not that it's not that it's a public meeting. I think it's right that we have the public meeting and give ratepayers an opportunity to ask questions. I think we have to be careful though about situations where we have client solicitor issues. And again, we told individuals tonight that you could come to that meeting and voice their concern. The question is, if they ask a question, we're probably not going to answer it because we necessarily can't if it stuff's in the courts. So the issue is, I think we need to be very clear to individuals from posting of it or whatever, that we have to be very clear about what questions every question is going to be accepted. However, you may not get a response in which you think you're going to get because of these enclosed camera or client solicitor issues. I think we just have to be very clear, because I don't think it's fair for council members to get asked those questions, because ultimately we're not always on the up and up on what's in the legal ramifications of a court case or whatever the case may be. But ultimately, those are questions that are probably going to come from the public, of ones that have issues or concerns of a highly objectable nature, as how I would put it. So I think we just need to be clear about what the procedure is and what the intention of this meeting is. It's not necessarily to oil your dirty laundry, but it's ultimately understand what the council should be looking at in the future about how things need to be treated in the municipality. But I think we just need to be clear on that, because there was a very vocal group here tonight that, and rightfully so, want to see some result and answer, but I'm not sure we can give them the answers they want based on the information that we have in the details that we have within the court system. So I just think we need to be clear.
I agree with that statement entirely. And while we may have been making the best of intentions in following all the processes and rules and regulations that we believe we were under, there may be something come out of court challenge, and that we will probably have to wait until some of this stuff is decided. And then we'll just have to do what we have to do. Councillor Slate?
So what my suggestion is based on the conversation, if it becomes an issue with that, I think that would be only fair to communicate to the group that was here tonight that if there's something that they're going to bring to that meeting that they think they're going to get a response for, they may not get one. I think they need to be given a heads up or an understanding, because they left here with a date and a time and a place. That's what they left here with. So knowing full well they're probably come on that date, that time, to ask those questions that they weren't able to ask tonight. So I think we just need to make sure we're clear.
Yeah, I think that will be, many of those questions, I hope, are answered in the in-camera session. as to what we can answer and what we can't answer. Because we are under a very judicial, prescriptive set of rules that we have to follow. Okay. Okay. Finally, we are at 7.8.3. Rob, and who is taking this? You doing?
Yep.
Okay.
So at the August 13th, the last council meeting, council received a delegation from Tucker Smith Telecommunications regarding a request to sever a small parcel of land from the Emergency Services Training Center for the purposes of a utility building. Council asked us staff to prepare a report in response to the request. So just for background information, in 2013, council entered into a lease agreement with Tucker Smith Telecommunications to house their equipment in the furnace room and in the Emergency Services Training Center. That was a 5-year lease that expired in July of this year. And after the 5-year lease agreement, there's a 1-year termination provision in that. At a previous council meeting, council has declared the Emergency Service Training Center surplus and are receiving offers on that building. And essentially, at the time of reviewing and discussing the future of the Emergency Service Training Center, staff was unaware of the ramifications of giving that notice, exercising that termination provision in the agreement. The agreement suggests the removal of the equipment is easily done. It can be done in a fairly easy manner, but as we are now aware, that's not the case. It is an extensive process. So when staff became aware of the permanent nature, there were several options that were discussed and presented. None of them worked or were convenient or acceptable to Tucker Smith Telecommunications. And the one that was acceptable to them was the severance of the small parcel. As council recalls, Tucker Smith is requesting the severance of a 10 meter by 10 meter parcel in the northeast corner of the property to accommodate a fiber hub building. The building is approximately, according to the drawing, is about 4 meters by 4 meters. We've been in consultation with the county's planner and has indicated that it is possible that size of a parcel could accommodate a vehicle on that size of parcel, and has also determined that a rezoning application would be needed to allow for the construction of the building on that parcel. And it's also been determined that that size of a building does require a building permit. The rezoning application, the building permit, and the access, whether it's off of the county road or whether it's an easement agreement with any potential future owner of the Emergency Service Training Center, would be done in consultation with the municipality of Central Huron, because the building and the property is in Central Huron, not in North Huron. Just in terms of what this council can do, this council can you can use your authority under the Planning Act, and you can sever that the 10 meter by 10 meter parcel off of that property. Essentially, it involves having a survey completed and registered. So you don't have to go through the whole consent process. Okay, so you can use your authority, sever off that parcel. You don't have to go through the consent process and have it registered on title. Then in terms of, you could take that parcel and you could transfer it, the ownership in terms of to Tucker Smith Telecommunications. And then they could then submit the rezoning application, apply for the building permit, and work essentially with Central Huron, because that's the municipality in which the property is located, and work, I'll call it the details of that development in terms of around that. In terms of costs, the cost to North Huron to create and transfer the parcel is approximately $2,500. That would include your legal costs, and that would include your surveying of your land. The cost to rezone the property, that would be an application again to Central Huron. It's about $1,900. And the building permit for 172 square foot utility building using Central Huron's rates is around $186, $200 is what would be incurred there. So if council so wishes, can direct staff to proceed in that manner. And in terms of proceed with the creation of the parcel and transferring of the ownership. It's also recommended in the report, you'll see that on the basis that council has declared the training center surplus to exercise the termination provision, essentially formally notifying Tucker Smith in writing that is council's intentions of potentially selling that properties in terms of, so to enable them to move forward with their process. And as well, and similarly, we have a lease agreement with that on that emergency service training center with the county for the provision of ambulance services. Staff have spoken and have had discussions with the county. They've indicated essentially not a problem. They just would like, they indicated 2 weeks notice, but I think in fairness, we should give them a month. The agreement indicates 90 days. So if that's acceptable to council, we can proceed on them in that manner.
Councillor Vaughan.
So you're suggesting that we cover the costs of the rezoning and all that?
No.
No. Okay.
So what I'm suggesting is that council uses their consent authority, creates the parcel. So creating the parcel involves registration costs and involves surveying costs. And then then the ownership of that parcel will be transferred to Tucker Smith, and then they would need to submit the rezoning application.
Okay. I thought you were assuming.
Yeah, no.
Deputy Reeve.
So what if Tucker Smith decides that they want their own laneway into that property rather than going through our property? Is it their responsibility to contact the county for an entranceway, or who does this?
So that would be discussed with Municipality Central Huron in terms of the county public works. The Emergency Service Training Center is actually within the urban limits of Central Huron, and Central Huron basically issues or grants the access permit. The county does not, because it's within the urban limits. So it's actually Central Huron that would grant the access, and it would be Central Huron that would make the decision in terms of where that access would be granted.
I thought for being a county road, the county would be in control.
Typically it would, however, because it's within the urban limit, the Public Works Department has told me that it would be Central Huron making that decision.
Councillor Stewart.
I just want to confirm that Tucker Smith Telecommunications are, I guess they're aware of this plan and that they are satisfied with this plan.
Yes. Yes, we are.
And I will add that in discussions with Jim Ginn, Mayor of Central Huron, he is quite in favor of the 2 municipalities working with Tucker Smith Communications to make the communication system work, so that I don't see any problems if we do what we can do and Central Huron does what they can do. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
And Councillor Hallahan seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thanks, you've been patient, Ron.
Well, thank you for working with this. Absolutely appreciate it.
Hey, we're the guys that need to be able to communicate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Moving to 8.1, Barn Dance Historical Society letter, Reba Museum.
I'll move it.
Okay, and Councillor Vaughan seconds.
May I make a comment?
You may.
it's important that we preserve our, and showcase our past. And the CKNX Barn Dance Museum is an important link to our past. The Barn Dance Jamboree in Campo provides a big economic boost to our community and to the many groups it supports. And I just hope that as we go forward with this process, we keep that in mind, that it's both part of our past, but it's also a part of our future.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, 8.2, Blythe Arts and Cultural Initiative 1419 Inc. Requesting a letter of support for changes and or alteration or additions to existing licensed area application to the AGCO for the Blythe Community Hall. Memorial Community Hall. Dwayne, do you want to read the suggested? Or,
The motion?
or lead discussion? Yeah.
Sure. Actually, Reeve, your CEO is here, and he may have some comments that you can provide.
Kirk, do you have comments that you can provide on this?
Regarding the occupant load?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the occupant load calculations were provided by the fire prevention officer. I checked those calculations as well with the requirements of the Ontario Building Code for assembly occupancy and alcohol and dining establishments, and I concur with the numbers that were presented. Mike also went further to ensure that the calculations were calculated on the size of the doors that will provide egress for the building, and those numbers are fine as well.
So it would meet all accessibility regulations?
Well, with respect to accessibility, the building, when it went through the remodeling stage,
Yeah.
they had to meet section 3.8 of the code with respect to accessibility. As far as getting individuals out that are challenged in such means, the egress door widths and the calculations in the building code don't pay respect to that specifically. So we just go on the calculations that are provided, be it individuals that need assistance to get out, whether they're blind, deaf, or whatnot, they're still going to get out within the minimum requirement for the width of the doors that are provided.
Okay. Councillor Vaughn.
This is sort of peripheral to this topic, but I've had a talk with 1419 chairperson, and it is very encouraging what is in the plans, the near plans. And I was getting a little bit concerned about not hearing much of what's going on, but there are some very positive moves ahead. There's nothing to announce at the moment, but it's very, very encouraging what their plans are.
Councillor Syke.
Is this for a permanent change? Like, okay, so this is a
Changing
permanent change. This
their
is not something
permanent
they're already doing, because they've already got a changes to their liquor license act now. I'm just concerned about that this is for a permanent change to their license. Okay, not fine. I'm fine with it.
Deputy Reeve.
So who polices this?
Not the building department.
Not the building department, but I'm talking about the sidewalk. It's not a part of the courtyard as far as the town hall. So somebody has to police this. Who does that? I don't know who does that.
Councillor Syke.
Would be the AGCO. So anybody who has a building special occasion permit or a permanent license in Ontario is required under that. If they have inspectors all over, and they are unannounced inspectors. So they're the ones that police liquor permits within the province of Ontario.
Okay, I'll maybe ask another question. that basically for fencing, if you were just using 4 foot high, you have to have 2 fences 10 feet apart around licensed to prevent people hopping over the fence without being seen. Or you can go to 6 foot fence panels. Would egress out through a 6 foot fence panel be workable when after that is up for a large grouping? Would they still meet? And that's probably a question for Mike rather than you.
Yeah, I think the building code stops at the building,
Mhm.
right? So in fairness to that question, I think Mike would comment on that, maybe through a fire safety plan in the event that that fencing is up. But certainly, if we take into calculating, when you calculate the occupant load for a building, you're looking at all of the exits within the entire building, not, so to speak, like a herd of cattle going with only one gate. And I think the egress ingress for that gate, more specifically the egress, would be sized larger in the event. You're going to have the overflow in the courtyard standing there. Still, for the egress out the gate, I would assume and hope that would be sized a lot larger to accommodate.
Okay. I just don't want us to be not allowing proper egress. Because I know at the Belgrade Community Center, there was a lot of discussion when we were told we had to be able to have 986 people leave in under 2 minutes. That's why fire doors are as they are. So what is council's pleasure on this?
I'll move it, Reeve.
Okay, Councillor Stewart, second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay. The Township of Selwyn Resolution Provincial Agricultural Systems Mapping. Do we know enough to make a decision on this tonight? Councillor Syke?
I personally don't. So
I would prefer
I would-
that we have staff send a letter asking them for more information as to why this has came to us. And I'm not even sure where Selwyn is, whether they're within Greenbelt or whether they're up north or where they are, so that I would look at a deferral on this till we get more information and staff be directed to try and obtain.
I'll move that.
Deputy Reeve Campbell seconds. Have you got that, Barb? Yeah, okay. All in favor? Carried. Town of Oakville, resolution re-regulating the display and distribution of objectionable images. Somebody want to weigh in on this one?
Seems to me it's too much of a local issue. I mean, it applies in a lot of areas, but I think this is a specific issue that I'm not sure that our opinions carry much weight or provide much value to OPIP.
And objectionable is in the eye of the beholder. And what might have been objectionable 10 years ago maybe isn't anymore. And the reverse of that, what was considered common 10 years ago, may be objectionable now. It's a moving target. Does anybody have thoughts on a possible motion for this?
I move we pass on to the next item.
We receive for information? If that's
I'll go with
okay.
that, yes.
Hoover,
Ron moved it.
Vaughn, Councillor Vodden, and Councillor Ritzma-Taninga to receive it for information. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, 8.5, Huron County Economic Development, 2018 Supporting Local Economic Development, SLED program. Do you want to take it from there, Dwayne?
Sure. So the county, in the past, the county has allocated $10,000 to each lower tier municipality, and it's been, for lack of a better word, money available, and basically the municipality needed to tell the county how they wanted to spend that $10,000 that had been allocated by the county. That's kind of what's been done in the past. What the county has done is they've revamped the program. They have still allocated $10,000 to each lower tier municipality, but rather than, kind of here's 10,000, tell us how you're going to spend it. The county has revamped the program basically, through it's an application process now, whereby you make an application to the county, basically how you would spend $10,000 that is available to you. Related to economic development, of course. In the past, for example, the money has been used towards, there was airport feasibility study that was completed. The 10,000 could be used towards something of that nature. So there may be a study, for example, that the municipality wants to undertake, something you want to look at more detail. You would complete the application, submit it to the county, and argue in terms of how this would be good for North Huron. The recommendation here at this point, this program is just launched. It's new in terms of the way it's currently set up. So the recommendation here is to receive the information from the county as they presented it and refer it to the Economic Development Committee. They meet this Thursday. They may have some ideas, come back to you with some suggestions as to how you might want to consider doing that. Or, perhaps council already has some ideas as to how that money could be utilized from an economic development perspective. So,
Councillor Vodden.
I'm kind of wondering if at some point we're going to hear something from the Economic Development Committee about a vision of the future that we should be working on together. I don't feel that we have a current vision as council at this point, and I think the reason that we were in favor of setting up an Economic Development Committee was to achieve that kind of vision of the future. Is it in development, or are we going to see it at some point? Or
in terms, the committee there's been a number of projects, initiatives that the committee has been discussing. The first few months of the committee's existence has essentially been, I'll call it finding legs, in terms of for the committee itself to all agree in terms of what they're doing and what they're not doing. So I think there's now, the committee itself has I would say it's just a common understanding in terms of what they're doing and what they're not doing. And yeah, they're working on some projects. I don't know, Trevor.
Yeah,
So-
the council's aware of the downtown revitalization plan that came here. That is, I would suggest that has become upfront and topic of most of the discussion in economic development, only because of the OMAFRA money that is required, that in order to get the money from OMAFRA, you need to have the plan in order to get that money. So part of that it has been discussed. A lot of the discussion ultimately it's going to come back to is retention of employment. That I think that has been another one that's a hot button conversation within the municipality about how do we retain employment, how do we get people to come and work in our factories and settle, and you'll probably see in the economic development meetings that there's lots of discussion about housing. So how does economic development help those discussions? And those kind of discussions can come here, but I don't think the economic development committee hasn't really figured out what the requirement or what the request of council is as of yet in order to bring it here. So there's a report that's coming with regards to the vitalization of the downtown that's being presented by Laura in a public meeting and a whole bunch of that stuff. So that's coming here at some point that council will get at. But from a standpoint of where we're working and what we're trying to accomplish, it's really more of the economic development strategic plan. That's what we went back to that drawing paper about what that plan was and see how we can pick little pieces off and get the successes that we see.
Which plan is that?
So that's the economic development strategic plan, the one from 2015 to 2018.
Okay.
So this is receiving it for information. You're moving,
Yes.
okay. Councilor Ritzman Taninga seconding. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving to 8.6, OMAFRA Rural Economic Development, or the RED or RED program. And I think there's something in the neighborhood of 28th of September that a submission would have to be made if we were making a submission to this program. Is there any staff that you know of that are already working on something towards that?
Not to my knowledge, it has been shared with staff. I do know that one of our staff members is, so part of the RED Economic Development Program supports advertising, website, all that sort of communication. So they're exploring some possibilities, some ideas, but we don't have anything concrete at this point for council. But we can certainly, unless council has any suggestions or ideas, continue to develop that.
Councilor Singh.
So what I would suggest is that I think what Dwayne's talking about is a lot of that discussion has happened at the economic development group as well, with how do we communicate with our ratepayers, how do we communicate with the outside world, and if anybody, if you haven't heard about 3 times already today, is that people can't find anything on our website, or very limited information if they want to find it. So, I think what you're going to find is if this gets submitted to the economic development group, that it's going to be an initiative where some of that marketing communication that even when Councillor Knott was here, he made it very clear that it, and I think there has been many staff that have said our website is not the most ideal. It's not the easiest to maintain. It's not it's outdated, there's, list goes on and on. So, you know, that could be something that the economic development community might throw their hat behind in order to get some meaningful results with regards to that. So I think if it gets to the economic development group, I think they hear that type of stuff, Dwayne, I think they may even be supportive of that initiative.
Councillor
September
Vaughn,
28th is going to be here very, very soon.
we have
We need to get our
to
act
have
together.
decisions made
We're going to,
so we can pass a motion 17th. Go ahead.
So yeah, so the economic development group meets Thursday, which
That's good.
is ideal. I think in my mind, I think if Dwayne brings that, the little information that he may have from, I'm assuming it's Denise, to the economic development group to talk about this, you know, I think that's a low-lying fruit that we could nail pretty easily with this money. And really, what are we trying to accomplish? Let's and then we could have something approved and looked at for the September the 17th, and the application would be filed for the 28th. In my mind, I think it's a slam dunk in my mind.
And that is received for information and you have verbal direction. Okay. Need a mover and seconder. Councillor Sype, Councillor Ritzman-Tenenga, all in favor? Carried. Okay, 8.7, Maitland Conservation. Redraft cost sharing proposal, water and erosion control initiative. Is there any
questions? A lot of the infrastructure that was created back in the 70s, the 80s, and the beginning of the 90s, we received a lot of grants from the provincial government. 85% of the cost covered by the provincial government. Well, now there is no grants. So some of the municipalities that have some of these, well, there's Gorey Dam, the Bluebell Dam, and the Brussels one, are all in a state of needing maintenance done. And we have no infrastructure money, because all our infrastructure money is moved out.
Councillor Sype?
So the way I read this, the way it currently is the levy would in essence, the levy would cover maintenance and infrastructure stuff the way it reads today.
That's right.
The request from Maitland Valley is to change that to a 50 for Maitland Valley in the levy, and the municipality that it actually owns, they're covering the other 50%. It doesn't
That's
count
what
in
we're
the
asking.
levy. Okay.
We are drafting this, we drafted this letter to send out to all the municipalities, because we have other municipalities. North Perth has the tunnel through the town of Blissville, which is going to start needing repair and maintenance very soon. Even though you can drive 4 tractor trailer trucks through that tunnel under the road, still has to be repaired. And North Perth is going to help out in this too. And we also have the slopes along the lake at Goderich. But right now with all this high water is not helping the erosion along the lake shore. But what they're asking for, if we have any input at all, to send them a letter just to help out. I asked them to help us remove this dam here, but I didn't get very far.
I'm not sure whether I should be asking to leave the chair to comment on this, or whether council will hear a couple of sentences from me.
I would say yes.
As long as they're short.
I believe because the town of Wingham, thus it got handed through to the municipality of North Huron, the house and dam. Nobody seems to be willing to help with it. I'm not sure whether our levy should be spent on 3 other dams owned by Maitland Valley because they took ownership of them 20, 30, 40 years ago, something like that. And the other side of it, the bluffs and slopes at Lake Huron. It was a joke when I was a kid. Don't buy in Ashfield, buy in West Wawanosh, and then you'll be at Highway 21 when they have to move it east. There's some of this, no matter what we do, it's only a temporary situation. And I think, where possible, naturalize as much as possible to cut down risks of erosion, risks to people. But I think we have to realize there's a lot of natural processes and that we can't always have something propped up by having somebody else's tax bill pay for it. Thank you.
Now, we will be meeting with we have met with the MPs now, our local ones that cover all of the watershed. We met with them in July. Planning on meeting with the MPPs, the Ontario representatives, towards the end of the summer. I think we're almost there, but it's we're trying to let them get situated into their positions and try and get some more funding, try and get our funding back. Now, there's been so many things have been cut. Anything to do with the conservation, M&R have all been cut. All these different sources have been cut, which eventually cuts us too, because it's some of these things have to be done.
Councillor Howard.
The motion is just to receive this as information. Is that right?
That's what's printed. By the looks of things, that is.
As far as we have to go.
No, nobody's come up with a different answer yet, so that, are you
I'll make that
making
motion.
that motion for information?
Yes.
Okay, I'm receiving that. Councillor Rodden is seconding. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay. It's Reeves activity report. So, one of the things that learned just a bit over a week ago, that Julie Sawchuk did sort of an inspirational talk, discussion with the Princess contestants and the Queen contestants at the Huron County Plowing Match. In that, we found out that she is designate RHFAC, which I believe stands for Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Advisor. She is one of only 2 in Ontario. So that, so that she went out to BC and took the course. And this is to evaluate building accessibility at 2 levels of certification, as certified or certified gold. So, moving on to AMO. I got into Ottawa on the train about 4:30 on the Sunday. Checked into the suites, got to the convention center about 5:30 to register and check out the trade show. Monday, there was Ottawa reception and a few things. I sprained an ankle going into the convention center, so I didn't go to the Ottawa reception at Lansdowne Field. I'm not sure whether Councillor Ritzman-Teninga might mention that. But I was there at 8 a.m. on Monday morning for Lynn Dolan, AMO president, and other dignitaries to do the usual opening ceremonies. And then there was opinions on future of government and where we are going in the next 2 years as a discussion. There was a break with the exhibitors, 10 to 10:30. Then there was a session with Nick Danos on AMO's most recent polling results. There were sessions then, but I visited more of the exhibitors in the trade show and went to the caucus luncheon for Small Urban Caucus. And that's reimagine your banking relationship. And it was the credit union, and I have the bag of information if anybody wants to borrow it. There's 2 or 3 pamphlets on credit unions and what they can do now. And while it's still not near to the level of being equal to the banks, there has been a lot of things opened up to credit unions and even in the municipal sector. Then I went to reliable electronic municipal records, easy when using electronic and digital signatures. And there was an AMO pilot project in Prescott Russell and municipality of Kincardine. And so that they talked about how they did double entry emails to confirm signatures for anything where digital signatures were put on and how they were working through it. And that was led by Nadia Belhadfa, and she's Director of Digital Transformations, Notarius Incorporated. So that you can probably guess who spoke on behalf of the municipality of Kincardine. And she did a marvelous job because the way the lighting was, she couldn't see her slides on the screen, so that she had to carry and ad lib, and she didn't miss many of the points. So she knows what she was doing and did a great job of it. And it was the 2 municipalities was their experiences and what they learned from that. So Monday evening, I made the Ingersoll Hospitality Suite. We passed a resolution in support of them not having any say in possibly the Ministry of the Environment plunking a landfill into their municipality without any voice of the local council. And when we were one of 70 municipalities that sent a resolution of support, I felt that it was good to say, yes, we were glad to send that resolution in support of them, and they appreciated that. There was also hospitality suite sponsored by Bruce Power. I was there for a short time, and then as a member of county council, I attended the Cowan Insurance Hospitality Suite and the Union Gas Hospitality Suite. Believe it or not, I did all that walking between, because part of it was down on Clarence Street, part on York Street, and the rest at the convention center. And it was going back and forth in between. So I went from Union Gases to the Northern Ontario, where it was an excellent networking room to talk to other municipal councillors. And there was a good collection of provincial ministers there as well. Tuesday's learning breakfast, I went to the municipal infrastructure one, the dawn of a new era. And it was on new regulations on construction liens and etc. And then I attended spurring rural economic activity, challenges and opportunities. The learning lunch was Main Street, Ontario. Heritage meets accessibility. There was something familiar for me there. And then before Ministers Forum or Bear Pit session, the Honorable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, gave an interesting speech. Even showed a picture that his wife had kept when he had hair. But it was in the early 80s that Steve Clark set a record for the youngest mayor of an Ontario city, of Belleville, when he was 22. I think 8 or 9 years later, he was president of AMO. So that we are privileged to have a person in municipal affairs and housing with the deep background, the easy approachability that we have in Steve Clark. And in the Ministers Forum, there was 29 questions asked, and it was a little after it, while there was another reception going on, I got a 3-minute conversation with the Deputy Premier and Health Minister, Christine Elliott, lobbying for mental health for our school age and high school age children, because that maybe is just as dangerous or more dangerous than the opioid crisis, because there's probably more young people just don't know how to handle a certain amount of pressure. And I found it interesting at 6 o'clock on City News, that was one of the things that was talked about with students coming back to school today, and the number that had asked if there was anything they could do to have mental health counseling. So I thought that was timely. And I met with various other ministers, their assistants, and senior staff, so that I felt that it was very rewarding there, and the networking, I believe, is important. Breakfast on Wednesday, I went to Vision, 100% plastic recovery through the 4 hours, sponsored by the Canadian Plastic Association. And that was a very good point where they were looking at standardizing a whole bunch of the plastics so that there wasn't quite the array of different chemical compositions, and that how all the plastic could possibly be recycled if you could get people to put it in the right bin. Jamie McGarvey, incoming AMO president, made a speech, and the Wednesday morning session was cannabis and communities, legal, youth justice, POA, court implications, and bylaw enforcement. And there was a panel of police, lawyers, social workers. And then basically it was adjournment. And no, I didn't win the Air Canada tickets. Didn't even know who the ones that did, so I will end my report there. Sorry for being so lengthy, but I felt that it was a good convention. I will go to council members' reports, verbal or written updates as to what they want to. You have, okay, I'll go to Councillor Ritzman-Taninga.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. So I also attended AMO this year, and I'm really glad that I went. It was the first time for me to go to AMO. And so it's different than Roma because you're with all the municipalities, which is very interesting. It was a good opportunity to reconnect with some colleagues and make new acquaintances and to network. And it's always good to hear about and discuss what's happening in other municipalities around the province. And it puts into perspective for me some of the challenges that we have here, but also really affirms that we're making some really great steps forward in our municipality. And we have a lot of really good things happening here. So like Neil, I attended quite a number of different sessions, and I won't go into all the same detail that he did, but one of the ones that I did quite enjoy was a session about spurring on rural economic activity, its challenges and opportunities, because I really feel that here in North Huron, we have 2 excellent BIAs who are working very hard to do a lot of great economic development in the area, and now also we have our economic development board that's also working very hard to really put North Huron on the map and to look at new and innovative ways of increasing not only economic development, but looking at housing challenges and what else we can do to really bolster this area. And while I was there, I actually had an opportunity to talk with a councillor from Kingston, and we got talking about what our BIA was doing, what they were doing in Kingston, and one of the things that came up was this book called How to Kill Your Community, 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, which the Wingham BIA is going through as a bit of a study. And he was like, why would you read that? It sounds counterintuitive or counteractive as to what you want to do. And I said, well, you have to look at it in the way that he's saying, if you want to kill your community, this is what you need to do. And whereas if you don't, then you need to do the opposite, obviously. So it was great to connect with him and talk with him about what they're doing in Kingston, what we're doing here. And then the accessibility and heritage luncheon that Neil and I both attended, it was St. Mary's that completely redid their main street and how they went about bringing it up to the accessibility code. And they didn't just listen to what the engineers said, but they also brought on key members of the community who would be stakeholders and have some really good insight on how to redesign and develop that Main Street area. And I got thinking about some of that and some of the challenges that we have here and looking at some of the infrastructure that we have to look at, and particularly the house and dam, and how it can't just be led by engineers and municipality, but we also need to bring in some of those key stakeholders and really listen to what they're saying and what they're after, and maybe we can find some great solutions to moving that forward. So I enjoyed my time, and I'm quite glad that I was able to go.
Any other councillors want to make a report at this time? Okay, thank you. No, no motion to bylaws. Okay, 11.1, bylaw number 78, 2017. You want to take that, Gordon,
So bylaw 78 2018 being a bylaw to authorize civil marriage solemnization services by the Township of North Huron be introduced, read first, second, third, and final time, signed by the Raven clerk and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Councillor Syed, Councillor Vaughn, all in favor? Carried. Okay. You want to make announcements now, or?
So a couple of announcements. One is the town hall public meeting is scheduled for Monday, September the 24th at 7 o'clock in the Wingham Town Hall Theater. Everyone, it's an open meeting. Everyone's encouraged to attend. The other announcement I'll make is in terms of the all candidate sessions have been scheduled. The first session is being held on September the 26th at 7 o'clock at the Wingham Legion. So you may wish to mark your calendar. The second is October the 9th at 7 o'clock at the Blythe Memorial Hall. So October the 9th at 7 o'clock at the Blythe Memorial Hall. So this is candidates who have filed their papers for positions on council. Answer questions and, outline, what their vision or what they would do if they were elected.
Does it include school board?
No, just municipal councilors. So that's it for announcements.
Right.
Just an announcement. Steam shows on Blythe this weekend first, and they just finished a project of electrical, bringing more electrical service at the campground.
Yeah.
About $3,000.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving to 14, closed session. Do I have a motion to go in camera? Councillor Vaughn, Councillor Syed, all in favor? Carried.